F-111s from Lakenheath Air Base in England headed out to bases in Turkey to begin further strikes.
The General Dynamics F-111. The first production aircraft to employ a variable swing wing, the F-111 specialty is penetrating heavily defended airspace. Known for its durability and versatility, the F-111 is one of the most effective weapons in the U.S. inventory. A long-range all-weather fighter bomber, the F-111 proved its worth in the 1986 Libyan air raid and more recently in the Persian Gulf. Tonight, soar high in the F-111.
This is the F-111, a fighter bomber that has seen action in Vietnam and in the Persian Gulf. Though the design is more than 30 years old, in some ways the plane is only now revealing its tremendous capabilities. A wide range of technological innovations have made the F-111 faster and deadlier than ever before. It has few rivals in its class. The TFX fighter bomber would incorporate new materials, microcircuit technology, and innovative engineering concepts, including solid-state electronics that would give the plane fantastic avionics capabilities. Turbofan engines utilizing afterburners for extra power. And most exciting of all, a variable swing wing that would greatly enhance the heavy plane's maneuverability. At the same time, the U.S. Navy was developing its own brand new high-tech aircraft for the Fleet Defense mission to succeed the F-4 Phantom. This design offered a very high level of common parts for both services. The only major components to differ were the landing gear, the wing length, and the nose. These are mock-ups of the two different nose designs. The Navy B design and the Air Force A model. McNamara was impressed. In November of 1962, an order was placed for 18 Air Force and 5 Navy planes. The aircraft was now designated the F-111. The planes were built at the Fort Worth plant of General Dynamics Convair Division. The first pre-production model was officially rolled out 16 days ahead of schedule. "25 months after the contract was signed, the first F-111, an Air Force A model, took to the air. The twin-seat F-111's unique features included a crew capsule that could be jettisoned as a complete unit clear of the main fuselage by the use of rockets. Ejection could be accomplished at any speed, at any altitude, or even below water.
That was an F-111 crew escape module ejection. Part of this module's design is derived from successful crew escape systems of earlier military aircraft. But these crew escape systems of the recent past would not assure successful recovery throughout the extended flight envelope of the F-111. Here is a test ejection from a simulated F-106 cockpit. The dummy crewmen were ejected at 300 knots. Projection is uncertain. Stabilization difficult. And recovery hazardous. What happens to the F-111 crew module and its crew under the same conditions of ejection? Severance causes little discomfort. The crew is protected during ejection. Stabilization is positive and is sustained throughout the ejection path. And the crewmen during recovery and descent are not exposed to hazard. Those are the reasons for the advanced design of the F-111 crew escape module. In this film, we're going to examine the functions of ejection, recovery, and landing of this module. True, these functions are automated. Writing out an automated ejection is one matter, but doing it with confidence and conviction, that's another. We're about to see a static, zero-speed firing of the F-111 test module. Starting out cold, naturally the 3,000-pound module is going to need maximum thrust to boost it some 400 to 500 feet upward from its point of severance. The module's using full rocket force, and with minimum altitude, the recovery chute deployment is sequenced quickly, just 1 second after ejection. Ejecting at zero or low velocity limits the overall trajectory path of the module to about 450 feet of apogee and 450 feet of downrange distance. Its actual ejection speed is moderate and requires only slight decay before recovery begins. At the other end of the flight envelope at higher speeds, both the ejection and the recovery systems respond by delaying their sequenced actions. We'll use a 700-knot sled ejection as a high-speed case. The module peaks out at about 1,200 feet in a 3,000-foot downrange projection. Since the severed module's forward speed is lending an aerodynamic lifting force of its own, rocket power is cut considerably, to about half of its full force, allowing it to burn longer and to give a greatly increased downrange projection of the module. This takes 4 seconds, sufficient time for the module's speed to decay to 300 knots, the allowable limit before the recovery chute can be deployed. That tracking footage gave us a pretty good impression of what the module's free flight behavior will be like in its two basic ejection circumstances: slow or zero speed and high speed. But what we couldn't see in those films are some of the pertinent anatomical details of the module itself. For instance, here on the exposed aft pressure bulkhead of the module are the rocket exhaust ports, or nozzles. In that first film we saw of a zero-speed ejection, this lower primary nozzle did most of the work, with a diminished longitudinal boost from the auxiliary nozzle here in the center of this port. But in higher speed ejections, the thrust is nearly equally divided between the lower nozzle, the primary, and the secondary nozzle. The secondary nozzle provides longitudinal stability for the module during ejection. It's a boost forward in direct proportion to the primary lift to prevent pitch-up during the module's free flight. The rocket, already mounted in this module, will expend its force upward and through the module's center of gravity. This hood-like projection is the stabilization glove, which provides longitudinal and lateral stability for the module's flight. Along its upper interface here, the drogue, or stabilization chute, is housed in a compartment with a blow-off cover. This is the chute we saw catapulted aft immediately following liftoff in both test ejections. Pilots have commented that you will definitely feel the bloom of this small chute as it decelerates the module's ejection speed. These pitch flaps drop down at the time of the module separation. Together with the stabilization flaps on the forward bulkhead, the pitch flaps are designed to prevent pitch up at high speeds. The glove itself, the stabilization brake chute, the pitch flaps, and stabilization flaps make up the module stabilization group. They do their work in the first few seconds after ejection. As we saw in the tracking films, the module's ejection speed must be reduced toward the end of its trajectory path before the 70-foot recovery chute will deploy. This ring sail type chute is packed just above its catapult in this compartment. Within 7 seconds after catapult firing, this repositioning mechanism, mounted here under a center panel, will be released explosively. Ultimately, the module will be suspended from here and from a point on the forward end of the module, allowing it to swing to a level position for descent and impact. These closely timed module systems deal with ejection, stabilization, and descent. But the real job, the one which comes first, is getting the module free of the parent aircraft. That's a complicated system which does a simple job.
To show you how it works, let's follow the severance system in animation. The key to the whole severance system is the eject handle itself. Once it's been released by squeeze and pull action, it initiates a dual explosive firing train. This firing train is the heart of the initiation complex. It's used as a kind of circuit board to interfuse the explosive-shaped charge which is fitted into the seams of the module splice planes. As the fuse or detonator cord burns through its path, it propagates a shock wave of heat and energy within its steel sheath. At key points, the charge wave is boosted or re-energized, and within a matter of microseconds, it completes its course, terminating in several component actuators, as well as in those main lines of explosive severance material. Though the shielded mild detonator cord is burning into its sequence, we see that the actual severance and firing of the rocket motor is delayed. Pilots say you will note this delay until the vital pre-severance phases of action have been completed. The first of these actions is to draw up the margin of slack in each crewman's restraint harness. A cartridge in each reel is set off and the harness automatically pulls up tight. This forces the crewman into a spine-straightened position, ready to accept the acceleration forces of the ejection. While this is happening, the emergency oxygen supply is brought into use. This 10-minute reserve of oxygen is manifolded directly into the normal supply line. The chaff dispensing system is explosively armed to release the chaff packs 3 seconds after ejection. However, the pilot has the pre-ejection option to bypass chaff dispersal for tactical reasons. In the fourth action in this preliminary sequence, the bulk of heavy lines, cables, and tubes penetrating the module into the hull are severed. This includes the antenna leads, secondary control cables, and the main oxygen line. The cutting is done by 3 cartridge-operated guillotines mounted at key points in the module structure. At this point, all but one of the pre-ejection functions have been set off by the SMDC. It's at this moment that the explosive compounds in the detonator cord burn up to and terminate in the rocket motor itself. As the steel tube casing of the SMDC ruptures its terminator, the rocket motor is fired. The firing of the motor instantly builds pressure, which is then diverted to initiate the severance action and subsequent release of recovery gear. The rocket motor pressure relays an ignition impulse to the strip of explosive severance material, flexible linear-shaped charge, which is embedded in the mating line of the module and hull. This rocket pressure activates a Q sensing mechanism mounted at the top of the rocket. This Q sensor measures the aircraft's speed at the time of the ejection and chooses the appropriate rocket force to be used in the module's severance. At speeds under 300 knots, the rocket motor primary mode is selected. It employs the primary and auxiliary nozzles for rocket exhaust. The primary nozzle delivers 27,000 pounds of force. The auxiliary delivery, 300 pounds. At speeds in excess of 300 knots, the bi-thrust mode is selected, which employs the primary and secondary nozzles. In this case, the Q sensor allows the diaphragm of the secondary nozzle to burst open. This increases the nozzle area, permitting 7,000 pounds of thrust to deliver from the secondary nozzle in combination with 9,000 pounds thrust deliverance from the primary nozzle. In both modes, the force from the upper nozzles provides longitudinal stability in the module's trajectory. This is the point at which we get severance. Regardless of the mode selected, the thrust generated by the rocket is matched to the velocity and altitude variables involved at the time of severance. Once the module is free of the parent aircraft, stabilization begins. There's a critical moment just as the module leaves the field of influence of the parent aircraft's body mass. The lifting module must be controlled from erratic motion or excessive pitch-up. At this point, the stabilization brake chute is catapulted aft, counteracting any tendencies of yaw. This chute also helps decay the module's velocity, slowing it to 300 knots in order that the recovery chute may be catapulted. At the same time, the pitch flaps and stabilization flap are extended. Should one pitch flap fail to drop, its partner is restrained from functioning. During this immediate post-ejection period, chaff is dispensed. The recovery initiator now turns to the mechanisms which will deploy the recovery chute. During this period of deceleration and free fall, the Q sensor is at work choosing the proper time delay before relaying a catapult signal for the recovery chute deployment. The Q sensor measured the speed of the aircraft at time of ejection, at which time it chose either a 1 second or a 4.4 second delay in starting the mechanism which will catapult the recovery chute. The delay matches the anticipated time for deceleration of the module to 300 knots. Now, at this time, a G sensor, which measures deceleration, is brought into action as a backup system for the Q sensor. Either the Q or G sensors will unlock the barostat initiator, which does the actual job of releasing the recovery chute for deployment. This barostat initiator has one job: to prevent deployment of the recovery chute before the module has dropped through the 15,000-foot mark of altitude. Rocket pressure buildup unlocked the bellows of the barostat, but it cannot do its job until either the Q or G sensors have given their consent signals. When the module has decelerated to 300 knots and has descended to the 15,000-foot threshold, then the barostat allows the detonation chain to complete its course and set off the recovery chute catapult. The recovery chute is blasted away at a rate of 45 feet per second, assuring that the covering bag is stripped off. The recovery chute is delivered aft in an extended reefed form. Now the chute begins to disreef and blossom. Within 7 seconds after chute catapult firing, the bridle cables are explosively released, allowing the module to swing down to a level attitude. When the barostat sent the repositioning signal, it simultaneously erected the UHF antenna and inflated the impact attenuation bags under the module's floor. These bags assure a safe touchdown even in a 20-knot ground wind on 5 degrees of slope, regardless of drift direction. At the point of landing, the crew will become active again. Their job is to release the recovery chute at the moment of touchdown in order to prevent the module from being rolled or dragged. 2 handles mounted on the canopy beam are used for both flotation bag inflation and chute release. The first handle inflates the aft flotation and self-righting bags, which must be activated to gain access to the recovery chute release handle. On impact, the blowout plugs of the attenuation bags pop out, allowing the bag to deflate, thus softening the impact. This is when the aircrew will pull that second handle, which releases the clevises of the recovery chute's bridle lines. As the module comes to a soft stop on the attenuation bags, the recovery chute is freed from its attach points fore and aft.
Should the automated system fail to deploy the recovery chute, there's a manual backup procedure for releasing it. When the crew's satisfied that they're below 15,000 feet, they pull the manual deploy handle on the canopy beam, and the chute is deployed in the standard manner. There's another side to this ejection experience, one that's not quite so technical. Naturally, we're still going by the book, but we're not just talking theory. You see, this has been done before, in fact, not far from here. Some of the aircrew's comments on the module ejection are interesting, help to focus some of the technical stuff into more personal terms. For instance, back at the beginning, when the handle was pulled, they felt a definite delay before anything happened. And another thing, the rocket firing. It sounded like a cannon, yet it wasn't an exceptionally loud noise. When they lifted off, there was nothing objectionable, just the positive forces of acceleration. They said the free fall was stable and comfortable. The module was nose down at about 70 degrees, and they had a good view of where they were going to settle in. And later, when the recovery chute blossomed, they felt a gradual deceleration, nothing abrupt. The pilots noted during the descent that the standby altimeter and cabin altimeter were operational. As they got down a bit, there were noticeable fumes in the cockpit. Each man opened his canopy hatch a few inches, and the air was cleared. And the touchdown, they had a good way of putting it. It was like jumping into a pillow. While a considerable amount of reliability and redundancy have been built into the module systems, there may be a time when the module fails to separate after both ejection handles have been pulled, possibly due to battle damage. Pulling the severance and flotation handle offers an alternative method of separating the module from the aircraft in flight. Since the rocket motor is not ignited in this procedure, the module will have to be freed from the aircraft by gravitational or aerodynamic forces alone, preferably under negative G flight. Remember, the crew will have to determine when the proper conditions have been met to manually deploy the recovery chute. This will be your ship someday soon. Probably one of the safest aircraft in use today. The first aircraft ever to use the crew escape module, as we've seen it here in these past few minutes. It puts in your hands a complete automated system for your safety and well-being. One which will demand your confidence and respect.
Ejection could be accomplished at any speed, at any altitude, or even below water. After it had landed or surfaced, the capsule could act as a survival shelter. The F-111 was also the first aircraft to go into full production utilizing afterburning turbofan engines. The TF-30 engine was economical and gave the plane great range. The afterburners were available for quick takeoff and extra speed. Still more range was built into the General Dynamics design by utilizing every possible area available for fuel storage. Even without external wing tanks, the plane had a range of over 2,500 nautical miles. With in-flight refueling or external fuel tanks, the F-111 could go anywhere, anytime. When no external fuel was carried, all of the wing points were free to lift an enormous array of weaponry. And of course, the plane could carry ordnance in its internal bomb bay. F-111s can carry almost any weapon in the Air Force arsenal, from the M61 Vulcan cannon to a free-falling nuclear bomb. The F-111 can drop foil as an electronic countermeasure, and flares can be discharged to confuse heat-seeking missiles. One of the original requirements of the TFX project was that the design should allow for landing on short, makeshift runways. General Dynamics met the challenge by inventing high-flotation, variable terrain landing gear. Another important F-111 feature that was brand new was terrain-following radar. This system allows pilots to select an operating height above ground of as little as 200 feet. When the control is set, the aircraft can fly at over 600 miles an hour by its forward terrain scanning radar, adjusting its height automatically. A manual mode allows pilots to use the radar-gathered information reproduced on a cockpit instrument display. Thus, it is possible for the F-111 to fly at night, in all weather, and still remain low enough to avoid radar detection. The F-111 was the first production aircraft in aviation history to employ variable swing wings. For high-speed flight, the F-111's wing could be swept back to form a delta configuration. An intermediate position was often used for economical mid-range flight. A full forward position was available for takeoff, landing, and low-speed flying. The plane could literally be redesigned in flight to suit the role it had to perform. Within the surface of the wing, flaps, slats, and fuel, together with their operating mechanisms, had to work side by side. To enable the forward slats to function, General Dynamics built a glove that also acted as an airfoil. The development of the Air Force F-111A model continued through the early 60s, and good progress was made as the new technology was put through its paces. General Dynamics and the Air Force were both pleased with the progress of their groundbreaking state-of-the-art aircraft. But Grumman, which was developing the Navy's F-111B model, had less success with its prototypes. The Navy was not happy with its new plane. Given Secretary of Defense McNamara's commitment to standardization, the Navy had little choice but to accept the B version of the F-111. But the F-111 prototypes were just too heavy for successful carrier use. Two expensive weight reduction programs failed to reduce the B model's weight by the required 20,000 pounds. Worse, the modification process had radically reduced standardization. The F-111B model was a beautiful aircraft, but it never saw service. In July of 1968, the Navy canceled the F-111B program. Instead, it went ahead with its new dedicated fleet defense fighter, Grumman's F-14 Tomcat. But the F-111A continued testing. The Air Force's Harvest Reaper program was launched to bring the F-111 to combat readiness. By early 1968, after 8 months of testing, it was decided that the F-111 should be tried out in actual combat conditions in Vietnam. Six aircraft from the 474th Tactical Fighter Wing were deployed from Nellis Air Force Base to Thailand. The F-111A flew out of the Royal Thai Air Force Base at Tak Lee. The combat testing and evaluation program was called Combat Lancer. The Thai base put the new planes within striking distance of North Vietnam. Unfortunately, the results were not all good. Within 2 weeks, 2 F-111s were lost without a trace. Less than a month later, another 111 went down. But this time, the crew ejected, and the wreckage was found and examined. The losses caused bad publicity back home and were wrongly attributed in some news reports to ground fire. After 50 missions had been flown, Operation Combat Lancer ended. The 3 remaining F-111s returned to Nellis for more testing. Afterwards, engineers discovered that the losses in Vietnam were caused by a failure in the plane's massive horizontal stabilizer. Then, in December of 1969, a Nellis-based F-111 lost a wing, resulting in a fatal crash. All F-111s were grounded. The entire program was placed under intense scrutiny. The wing problem was traced to a failure in the wing pivot box. These were hard times for General Dynamics. For the expense of developing the twin designs, considerable cost overruns, and the losses in Vietnam had caused the new fighter bomber to suffer at the hands of the press and political opponents alike. General Dynamics' defense was that the F-111 was a technological trailblazer that incorporated so many new systems that major problems would almost certainly be encountered. Both the Air Force and General Dynamics realized that despite the development problems, the F-111 was a winner, so they began improving the design. Despite the F-111's long evolution, very few external changes are noticeable. One minor one, the deletion of the moving air intake cowl and its replacement by the demand-activated inlet door, distinguishes the early A version from other models. By the time the modification program was completed, the F-111 had become a near-perfect plane. The Tactical Air Command used 4 different strike versions of the F-111. Externally, they were almost identical, but they varied considerably in cost, depending on the electronics packages used. The F-111 was also adopted by the Strategic Air Command, which needed a replacement for its older B-52s and B-58 Hustlers. SAC's new strategic bomber was dubbed the FB-111. The SAC version had a longer wing and a strengthened landing gear, but otherwise was similar to its cousins in the Tactical Air Command. Today, the F-111, once only designated a fighter, now also flies alongside B-52s as a strategic bomber. In 1972, 4 years after its first test in combat, the F-111 returned to Vietnam as part of Operation Linebacker. Within 33 hours of leaving home at Nellis Air Force Base, planes were striking targets in Hanoi. This time, the results were very different. Flying alone or in pairs, the planes of TAC's 474th Fighter Wing notched up 4,000 successful sorties in 6 months.
We're hit on into altitude, hold, and heading nav, and engage the autopilot. Working good.
Okay, we're coming up on our entry point in about 5 miles. We'll be turning right to a heading of 101.
Okay, coming right here. I'll go out and back and bypass on the radar altimeter. Put the left channel in TF, and we'll put the right channel over to the situation. Okay. Ready to start on down deck? Okay, auto TF, starting down.
Okay, I'm picking up the ground returns now.
Okay, attitude indicator, let's go. Okay. Coming on down the east coast, ground returns coming in, and the radar altimeter clicked in at 5,000.
Roger, we should level off about 500.
Get down to 1,000 here now, coming up. 700, 600. And it's leveling off real fine, 550.
Okay, looks good over here. I've got a ridge coming up at 5 miles on the scope, and it's dead ahead, going to 5 over 15.
Okay. Looks like it's about 3 miles on my e-scope now.
Right, okay, we should be passing in about 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to target, and we're in target, and I'm picking up returns. It looks good. Crosshairs are falling good.
Got the captain's mark.
In the whole operation, only 6 aircraft were lost, giving the F-111 the highest survival ratio of any combat aircraft in the theater. The F-111 returned from Vietnam with its reputation dramatically enhanced, and criticism of the plane became muted. 2 major modifications have dramatically increased the F-111's potential. One was devised by Grumman, the company that designed the Navy's F-111 model. Grumman's EF-111 Raven project found yet another use for this versatile airframe. The Raven project takes early model F-111s, strips them down to basic components, then completely rebuilds them as electronic countermeasures platforms. In the Raven, the second crew member is an electronics weapons operator who uses sophisticated equipment to disrupt enemy radar. This provides a curtain for other attacking aircraft. The Raven can be used in 3 different ways. First, in a standoff jamming role, providing protection for other aircraft from a distance. Second, as close air support, going in at low level to give ground attack aircraft electronic cover. And finally, the Raven can fly with an attacking force deep into hostile airspace, jamming enemy radar as it goes. This system was used extensively in the Persian Gulf. Another major modification fitted to new F-111s is PaveTac, a self-contained standoff weapons delivery system. PaveTac uses an infrared TV camera coupled to a laser rangefinder designator to place guided bombs or missiles on target. PaveTac components are fitted throughout the aircraft, but its major component is the PaveTac pod, which is fitted on a rotating cradle in the bomb bay. The pod is retracted into the bay when not in use. The PaveTac pod is equipped with electro-optical sensors, infrared TV camera, and laser. Its movable pod head provides complete coverage beneath the aircraft. Targets are tracked on radar and steering corrections are made. At a distance of approximately 3 miles, the target is identified on the TV display and the infrared imagery is switched on. The video picture permits extremely accurate target tracking. The laser-guided bomb is released. The aircraft turns away to avoid the bomb blast and anti-aircraft fire. The forward-looking infrared continues to track the target and point the laser. 5 seconds before impact, the laser is activated to guide the weapon. This is an actual AGM Maverick missile launch. The missile crosshairs are placed on the target by the weapon systems operator. The missile is now locked on target. When the missile has launched, the TV video will disappear, and the PaveTac's infrared video will be used to aim, track, and determine the success of the strike. April 14th, 1986. F-111s of the 48th Tactical Fighter Wing leave RAF Lakenheath as part of the American strike mission against Libya. In response to a wave of Libyan-sponsored terrorist acts, the United States will strike 5 targets. The F-111's standout performance in Vietnam, Libya, Panama, and the Persian Gulf has more than vindicated its once controversial design. Its bold swing wing is now an accepted feature of high-performance aircraft, and its high-speed, terrain-following capabilities have earned it acclaim as the best low-level strike plane in the world. As technology has changed, this versatile airframe has changed with it. The F-111 has become a crucial part of American air defense.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification icon for the latest videos as they are released. Thanks for watching and catch you in the next one. Ciao for now.